And hello there, Miss Emily Toner. Thank you for joining us today. This is my really good friend, Emily, and she is a clinical psychologist as well as mindfulness teacher and many, many other things like a climate warrior and a beautiful, beautiful person. So without further ado, thank you, Emily, for joining us today.
Hi, Sarah. So nice to be here. Very happy to be chatting to you today.
Now, I was really privileged to be a part of a group of us many, many summers ago where you took us through a values workshop. And it was really, really inspiring for all of us in that moment to actually think about what our values are and how they are in our lives and how they present themselves in our lives. And I know that this is sort of stuff that you do with corporates and also just general people. Can you tell us a bit about what you do with these value type workshops that you do?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess values are something that everyone knows about, but often we don't really take the time to specifically think about what do I value, but specifically, and how can I make values-based decisions? And why would I want to make a values-based decision? So my background, my research background is in behavioral neuroscience and in positive psychology, and kind of values-based action has a very strong foothold in that field, the science of well-being and happiness. And values are very much linked with well-being. And so when we're looking to boost well-being in a corporate space or just in the general public, then it's a great workshop to really start to explore who we are, what we stand for, and how we can take values based action in our life.
Beautiful. So good. And values are things that can change throughout our lives as well. Is that correct? They're like, yeah.
Definitely. So values are there are hundreds of different types of values. And values are really, they're kind of things that can change throughout our life, but generally we tend to stick around the same kinds of values. Maybe as we get older, they might shift a little bit, but generally we tend to have similar values throughout our lives. But interestingly enough, most of the time, a lot of us are spending time focused on either our family of origins values, maybe your parents' values, and you might be holding on to that without realizing, that's actually no longer what is important to me, but I'm living someone else's values, and that leads to decreased well-being. Or we might be living our societal values that actually aren't really in alignment with us. And an example of that for me would be materialism, for example. So having nice things, and like I do like having nice things, but I don't like it to the level, it's not as important to me at the level of what the outward marketing world would suggest that, is important for our happiness and well-being. And so that's a clear example of knowing what societal values are and how they differ from maybe your values. But most of the time, what we're doing is we're just absorbing our family of origins values, we're absorbing the values of our friends and our family and our society, and often we don't really think about what we care about, what we stand for. And it can lead to feeling a bit lost in life, it can lead to feeling unhappy. And so it's incredibly important that we take time out to think about, well, what do I stand for? And what does my family, what do I want to share with my children? What's important to me?
Yeah, beautiful. That's really lovely. And I actually have noticed when we do this sort of value work and we look at what's important to us, we also attract people in our lives that are similar of that nature as well. They have those values too. And I think it's important to say as well that, they do change over time, as you've just said, and sometimes they are driven by the culture and society, and it's okay to change from what you've had when you were 10 years old to where you are now in your life.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, beautiful. And so when you are working with people and you're doing these awesome values workshops, what would you start with first, and how would you take us, how could you take us through and our listeners through the start of your workshops?
A little journey. Yeah, beautiful. Well, one thing that's a nice little exercise we can do together now, and anyone listening right now can also sit and do with me, is a little guided visualization to start us out. And what I like to do is I like to think about when you're a lot older. So I guess it depends on how old you are listening to this, but let's imagine you're at your 80th birthday.
Yeah.
And you are, so what I'll do is I'll guide you through a little visualization of your 80th birthday.
Great.
And from that, we'll be able to elicit some values that might be important to you.
Okay, beautiful.
So,
let's do it.
Let's get comfy. So feel free to just close down the eyes if it feels comfortable, or you can just gaze at the kind of floor in front. And we're just going to take a moment to really arrive here. It might have been a busy day. Let's just take a moment to take a few conscious breaths. And see if you can come to your senses. So what can you hear around you? Just arrive here right now. If you can notice the feeling of the next in-breath. Out-breath. You might like to just check in with your body, because why not? While we're here, just before we get into this visualization, maybe just notice if you're holding any tension. How's your posture? How's the jaw? How's the brow? What's happening at the level of the tummy? Notice if you're holding any tension here that's not really needed. You can just let it go. So we just start to settle now. Now I'd like to allow you to bring to mind an image. And you're walking down, let's say we're walking down a corridor, and at the end there's a door. And what we're about to do is put our hand on the door handle, and we're going to open the door. And as soon as you open the door, there's a huge surprise. And everyone that you've ever known is here in this room. All sorts of people have come here. And at the top, at the front of the room, there's a big sign that says happy birthday with your name. And you realize you've just walked into your own surprise birthday. So just smile as you walk into the room. You might start to greet people. You might say hi. Might give some people a hug. You might be feeling overwhelmed, excited. You might feel connected. Just notice how you feel as you enter this room filled with all the people that care about you and that you care about. And as you take your place in the room in a special chair that they've placed for you, you see someone that you care about deeply stand up, move towards the front of the room, and begin to speak. They talk about your life. They talk about who you are, why they love you so much. And they talk about your accomplishments. They talk about who you are as a person and what you've stood for over the years. Just allow yourself to sit back and hear the words. What do they have to say about you and your life? And then that person comes to an end of their speech, and someone else that you know and care about deeply gets up. Could be a friend, one of your children. And don't limit yourself to people who are alive at this point. It could be anyone who knows you, who cares about you, has come to speak about you and the legacy that you lived in your life up until this point, the ripe old age of 80. And they tell some funny stories. And again, they speak of who you are and why you've touched their life and what you mean to them. What do they have to say? And they too come to the end of their speech. And as they move to sit back down, this room, this place starts to fade. And you allow that memory, that visualization to move into memory. And you just allow yourself to sit here, coming back to the breath, noticing how you're feeling, what any emotions that might have been brought up through that little visualization. Feeling your feet connected to the floor, sitting tall. Taking 2 more conscious breaths. And then opening up the eyes.
Oh, wow. I couldn't stop smiling. My whole face. I'd like to watch the recording of that. I reckon I was like
big grin.
smiling the whole time. It actually made me feel, just so happy. And there was a few tears as well that came out too. That's such a beautiful exercise to do.
Isn't it? It is special. And so what I love to do is to run people through that practice, often a bit longer than we've done, but we'll just do a little brief one today. And then to get them start to journal. So if you're tuning in and you want to write down anything, then what I've normally asked people to do is just to write down what people said about you. So you can remember what types of things were said. And who was there? Who were the 2 people that ended up standing up and speaking about you? And the third part, which maybe we can discuss for the sake of time, Sarah, is if you think about what they had to say, were there any common themes underlying that might have been that you could kind of tease out? Maybe it's kind of sounds like I stand for this. And then we can start to tease out what were the values maybe underpinning some of those behaviors.
Beautiful. Yeah. I think the most common theme was like weaved through was like sort of kept coming up for me was spontaneity, spontaneous and adventure and sort of that risk taking.
Amazing.
Yeah. So and I feel like that's a very common theme in my life as well. Like just sort of and it is important to me now. I really value experiences, over material things and things like that. If I was going to spend my money on something, it would be more about the experience with people. And so that was a common thing that came through. And even up to when I was 80, I was still taking
So
risks.
good. So good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
adventure is definitely a value. Spontaneity, maybe even novelty.
Yeah.
And anything else that came up?
What else came up was generosity and yeah, like big-hearted, kind-hearted. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was funny, actually. I mean, I have been looking after a little girl here recently, and her name's Sunny, and she's 4. And she was the one that came up and spoke.
Oh, that's
I
amazing.
know.
That's the best.
I know. And she was like,
Oh,
she's kind, she's funny, she makes me laugh,
I love
makes
that.
me food, looks after me, and
Oh, bless her.
yeah.
Oh,
So that was really
Sunny.
cute. I was like, oh, Sunny.
That's why you were grinning.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I cared for her yesterday as well. So we had a really nice time. So
That's
yeah.
lovely. I
Yeah.
love it. So many values. So you can tell with that exercise, so many values are coming out. And the thing I love about it is it's getting to the heart of what you'd like people to say about you, as opposed to, which is really what it gets to the heart of who you are and what you value, as opposed to maybe family values. So the next part of the workshop I would like get to would be getting people to start to think about, what are their family values? What does their mum value? What does their dad value? What do their siblings value? Is there an overall kind of culture of the family? In my family, I'd say logical analysis would be a huge value driven by my dad and my brothers. And it's not a value that I necessarily but also things like work ethic, which I also, really care about. A very strong value in my family. So thinking about family values.
Well,
and then
I think what has just come up for me then was most of my family are entrepreneurs. We've all got our own business, and that's similar to me as well. And even looking back down the line, my nonna and nonno, they had their own businesses too back in Italy.
Wow.
So it's definitely something that has come down from the ancestors, down the line. So
amazing. And are there any values that your family hold that you don't as strongly?
I would say I could speak to the value that I have that they don't have. And I would say that would be, definitely there's an importance in my life that's around climate and environment and looking after the earth and the world that we live in. And that, yes, they might have elements of that, but it's not a passion or a drive or a motivator for them in their life. So I would say that that's been like a kind of like, here's the family and I'm like over here,
Right.
And
and
I just was going to say, and I've found something else that's different to them and to what they like.
And it's great that you're able to express that and really roll with it, because a lot of people, I think the challenge is that often we don't really individuate from our family, and we kind of realize that we're still holding on to some of these values from our family. And so it's a really great start thinking about, okay, so what is it that I stand for that is similar to my family, maybe different? And what kind of values do if I have my own family, what kind of values do I want to hold, and do I want to model to my children, knowing that your children will create their own value system, and it might not be the same as yours one day, but you can definitely give them a good start in life with sharing and taking action based on what you care about.
Yeah, definitely. And would you say that like having only 5 or 3, or can you have a lot of values? Is that?
So, I mean, we all hold, it's very funny. So I often run, the next part of the session would be to run people through a values card sort. So they have 30 values or 40 values in cards, and they have to put them into different piles. And the funny thing about values are we value everything. There's only a few things we don't really value. Like we value, when you look at values, you're like, yeah, I care about that. I care about that. I care about that. And the problem is actually saying, well, I care about that, but I care about this a bit more.
Sure.
And so what I try and get people to do is to just sort them into 3 piles. So they've got very important to me, less important to me, and not important to me. And it's framed in that way because if you said, not interested, then people would put them all in the top pile.
Yeah, sure.
And so once you've done that, I actually think the most powerful part of this exercise for me, and I go and do this card sort every couple of months to reset and realign like where I'm at. And I found it's had a huge impact on my personal well-being and also given me a real direction in life. And probably the reason for that is that we know that values are kind of like our internal compass. So if you don't know what you stand for, and I would argue that, the more specific you can be, the better. So if you can say right now in my life for the next 3 months or the next 1 year, my top 5 values are this.
Yeah.
If you can say that and narrow it down that much, then you can actually start to make some very conscious decisions about everything in your life. And the beautiful thing about values is that you'll never ever regret a values-based decision. You can't regret it. So for example, have you ever had a time in your life where you've acted out of alignment with your values? You've done something that you knew was, out of alignment with what you care about.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, we all have,
a
right?
million times. Yeah.
Right. And how does it feel when you do that?
Yeah, it feels icky and it feels hard to even project and to even express. For an example is I recently wanted to stand up for climate change in this kind of run that I'm doing at the moment to save a forest in Tasmania. And I recently didn't really stand up for it. And it felt challenging for me to not stand up for it. And then I got off the phone and thought, oh, that felt so hard and really against everything that I believe in and what's important to me. So yeah, and I felt guilt around that almost or something.
Yeah. So it can feel icky, it can feel uncomfortable, it can bring up guilt, it can bring up shame, it can bring up all sorts of really uncomfortable emotions. It can actually make you physically sick when it's really out of alignment with your values. Say, I don't know, worst thing I can think about would be like cheating on someone or something. It can make you feel physically unwell. So you can imagine that living your life not in alignment with what you value doesn't lead to well-being because of that really horrible feelings you're experiencing. Alternatively, very simply, what does it feel like when you make a values congruent decision? So something in alignment with what you care about. What does that feel like?
Yeah, I suppose it feels like powerful and big and happy and not even big in a bad way, like even light, like it just feels nice and consistent, pleasant,
like energizing. It feels authentic.
Yes. Yeah.
Enjoyable. Yeah, exactly. And so most of us, we want to make values-based decisions, but a lot of the time we haven't really thought about specifically what we care about. So this, today what we're talking about is actually going away and thinking, well, why don't I do that 80th birthday exercise? Why don't I write down what I care about? And why don't I really get to the heart of it? So I think we potentially, the challenge with values is having them in front of you. So there's lots of online sort of lists and things that you can look up and you can see, okay, out of these, you can always print it out and say, out of these 100 values, I'm going to circle the ones that really stand out to me without just looking at them quickly. And then I encourage people to whittle that down to 5. And then I encourage people to whittle that down to 1 to 5. So actually order them. So you could say my top value this year is balance, for example.
Yes. Yeah.
And if that
must be hard to do.
It is hard, but you can do it. And when you do that, it's really wonderful. And it means you can start making values-based decisions straight away, because you can go, okay, well, with this, I've just been given a job offer. Okay, is this in line with my value of balance? If it's not, and this is my top value for this year, then it's an easy no.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it makes your decision-making
Beautiful.
process so much easier, because remember, you can't ever regret a values-based
Value.
decision.
Yes. I think that's the key takeaway from today. You can't regret a value-based decision. I love that, Em. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, my darling, thank you so much for sharing your beautiful meditation. I loved that. I think I'm going to, I don't know, use that every now and again.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it was gorgeous. And so tell our listeners where they can find you and where, you know, they could possibly work with you.
Definitely. So you can head to my website, emilytoner.com. You can see all the different things that I have on offer there. I have an online membership, a meditation live membership. I have some courses up there. And my kind of bread and butter is running workshops for the general public and for corporates around positive psychology, mindfulness, and kind of helping people manage what we were talking about before around the environment, manage climate grief, manage climate worry. So yeah, emilytoner.com.
Beautiful. Thank you, Em. Thanks for meeting us today. Lots of
You're
love.
welcome.